You can see I recorded it from below using these two mics. So they are cardioid mics, Rode NT5. And yeah, I've always found that with Dulcimer especially, it's very, very critical to set the position according to what you're doing. So how you orientate the mics, how far you put them from the instrument. I see a lot of person that put their mics above the instrument, and that seems to work very well for them. So I would say it's a lot about experimentation, and your dulcimer has some sound, some resonance everywhere. As you said earlier, sympathetic resonance is a big part of the dulcimer design. And you don't want to lose that, but you don't want as well to make the musical message unclear because of that. And so a lot of things is to know very well the instrument well enough, especially play with the right dynamics, because you know which note has to stand out, which note has to not stand out. So that's really the first part, is playing the part with the correct intention, and even exaggerate it a little bit. But that's another topic, and playing is of course a very important part. But about the miking itself, I would say you can easily catch. Chris is a mechanician, just like I am. So it's really about catching where the vibration modes amplification occur on the instrument. And if you pick with the mic some specific spot where some frequency is emphasized, you can get a loud note in the bass just when you play a F, for instance, and very quiet when you play a depending on where you aim on the instrument. So it's very important to take some time. Avoid putting the microphone too close to the instrument as well, because the closer you are, the more you have that kind of, let's say, proximity effects of emphasizing some items, some characteristics of the sound, and de-emphasizing some other characteristic, and ultimately unbalance your sound. So yeah, I would say when I record pieces where the dulcimer has to stand on its own, to be like, I don't know, I'm doing a lot of Baroque stuff recordings, and for this kind of purpose, I try to put the microphone a bit further away from the instrument, because I don't need as much of that proximity, of that very emphasized attack on the instrument. And when you listen to some covers, heavy metal things, or more modern things, like the stuff which will be on my upcoming album, more synth folk elements, you quickly notice that in order to have the dulcimer go lead above the rest of the accompaniment, it's critical to choose the right distance. So if you want something very acoustic, you can put them a bit further away, at least from my experience. And if you want the dulcimer to stand out above a crowded mix, that's really helpful to make it a bit closer, but still not too close. And choose, the closer you are, the most carefully you need to choose the orientation and where the microphone hits.
Are those microphones, is that a stereo pair?
So yes, that's another point that is important. I mostly use stereo pair. The ones I use are Rode NT5. Let me show you one of these.
Yeah. So they're a matched pair.
This is a matched pair, which is cardioid. So Rode is an Australian brand. They do very fine microphones. When I record dulcimer, there are several options I use. Either the NT5, either some large membranes like this one. So this is a Rode NT2000. I use this one also for vocals. So I use this one when I need a very or large membrane cardioids in general. When I need, let's say, to emphasize a lot the dulcimer, how to say, I don't have the word. You know, that that sustain, that very warm tone, and that when I mostly want, let's say, the percussive elements and a bit of sustain, but not overwhelming, that kind of things, I use smaller membranes because they tend to catch a bit less bass as well. That's mechanical. Mechanically, they work like that, and yeah, it works fine. So about mono versus stereo, as you asked, really depends on the context. Doing some mono recording, I would not recommend that, especially if you're playing a solo piece, because basically there's just you, and yeah, most I mean, it makes it a little narrow when for the listener who has a headphone or a soundbar or whatever. Um, Maybe in the context of some traditional arrangement with several instruments, I don't know, violin, banjo, drums, and whatever. And the dulcimer is more of an accompaniment element. Uh, and yeah, I would, that would work. That would work to make it mono. But as long in my music, it's hard to tell because the dulcimer is a very central part of it. I want it to shine, to be really above the rest. So I generally record in stereo. Yeah, at worst you cut one of the mics and you get one mono sound. So if you have some stereo mics, I would say that's better. That's much more versatile for the music in general.
Yeah, I have a stereo pair, but I set them up on a XY. They're on
Okay.
the same. Do you get phase issues with the two separated like that if you don't get them
So
just right?
as yeah, I use this device a lot to record my dulcimer, especially when I'm traveling. So it's a Zoom recorder, but not only for recording, even for let's say deliveries to customer. I use that a lot before I use left right separate left right configuration, because this, as you said, there is nearly no phase issue using that. The mics are very close. You can put them quite close to the instrument, like 20 or 30 centimeter. Yeah, 10, 10 inches. Yeah. As you said, there is no phase issues. Of course, when you record in stereo, especially yeah, when you don't know a lot about these phase things, what I recommend in general when I teach people how to record themselves is to take that kind of headphones, closed headphones, um, and something that when you put it on your head, it completely cuts you off from the sound of your dulcimer, because you need to hear what you're doing and what the microphones are hearing, and just listen to the two microphones in mono, stacked on top of each other. Because if you monitor them to have them on the left and the right, it can sound very large, very broad in your ears, and you can say, okay, I will record, and that will sound wonderful. But the problem is that sometimes if you stack them, if you play them in mono, or if you play them on speakers and you're too far away from the speakers, it tends to sound like mono, and the signals from left and right sum up together. And when they sum up together, you can have some phase issues. For instance, I don't want to go too technical, but the 100 hertz frequency goes positive on one mic and goes negative on the other mic, and when you sum them up, it tends to null down and make it kind of hollow. So you can really get a very accidented sound, Chris, as you said, with stereo pairs. So when my most useful tip for that is use close headphones, not too cheap if possible. And yeah, you have to not hear anything in the room, just your own heartbeats and your mics.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I stick with the stereo pair, because I can't hear well enough to be able to do like you're doing. You got to have a very critical ear, and I'm getting old, and you can probably the stereo pair is kind of foolproof,
Yeah, that's right. The XY is really probably
Yeah.
the easiest way to record and avoid accidents like that. Something that works fine also is when recording with a stereo pair, you can do some a recording of the stereo, collapse them to mono, and check if the sound is still there, if it does not lose its consistency. And you can do it in two steps. So you record with a certain mic placement, and yeah, if when you sum them to mono, if the sound is still there as you want it to be, then just keep it. It will sound better in stereo. So, and if you lose too much of it, then you need to rework your microphone placement. That's right. So some rule that is general and applicable to a lot of instruments is trying to keep a consistent distance between the instruments and the microphones. So for instance, yeah, they are approximately this distance. So yeah, and they are approximately the same distance from the board, from the lower board of the instrument. So that's pretty much it. And maybe one topic also that's interesting, I just thought about that, is the acoustics of the room. Of course, you may have, it's recording, it's not, let's say, hard science, or I mean, it's hard science, but when it comes to practical recording, you need to do with your conditions. If your room is too resonant, you have the risk by putting the microphones too far away from the instrument to catch too much of that wall waves bouncing back on the walls, catching too much of that as compared to the direct signal, and it can kind of drown the useful signal in between the bouncing waves on the walls, the resonance. So you might. If your acoustic is really poor, you can only record in your bathroom, for instance. You need to also make sure that proximity can help. It brings other drawbacks, but it's always a matter of compromise. If you don't have you never have perfect conditions. Unless you go to a very well-equipped studio, you have to do with the mics you have, the headphones you have, the playing level you have, and yeah, that's just it.